You're tuned to KDCR New York, Distinguished Comics Radio. Good evening, friends, and welcome to our third excursion into the four-color frontier, this Wednesday night, January 10th, 1940. I'm your host, Simon Carver, surrounded by microphones, coffee that's gone cold, and a desk that is absolutely buried in Superman comics.
And I'm Robert Reed, trying not to knock over any of those comics, Simon. Chicago boy back in this New York booth. Happy to report I still haven't converted him to the Cubs.
Not a chance, Robert. Yankees till they freeze the Hudson solid. But before we start a ball game on the air, let's get our bearings. If you've been with us from the start, you know we've already taken two big steps alongside this fella in the Cape. First show, we walked through Action Comics #1, his whole origin, the car on the cover, Clark and Lois, the governor's mansion, the crooked lobbyist. Second show, we galloped through Action Comics 2 to 7, wars in San Monte, mine disasters, football fields, dams bursting, crooked nightclubs, and circuses.
That was a nice tidy stack, Simon. Tonight you've brought me a mountain. We're doing Superman in Action Comics 8 through 19, plus Superman #1, Superman #2, and his trip to the New York World's Fair. I'm not saying it's too much, but if we go missing, listeners, send a search party to the KDCR archives.
It may break our programming, but we'll charge on. Think of tonight as one long leap, like Superman going from rooftop to rooftop, only we're hopping issue to issue instead. Now, as we sit here, it's not just our reading pile that feels heavy. You look at the papers. In Finland, they're fighting that winter war in the snow and pine forests. The Battle of Ratte Road just ended with the Finns somehow turning back a bigger force, and now there's talk of terrible cold, 40 below in some of those reports.
And out west in Europe, you got that Mechelen incident. German plane down in Belgium with invasion plans in its briefcase, if you can believe it. Britain's already put butter and bacon on ration, and they're talking about the Thames freezing. I saw one headline saying London hasn't been that cold since the last century.
So you've got submarines stalking the seas, armies on ice, governments tightening belts, and an awful lot of ordinary people wondering what slips next. It's the sort of winter where a radio bulletin can make your shoulders tense up before you even know what it says. Nights like that, a fellow reaches for stories where courage and decency actually get somewhere, where, just once, the man with the conscience is also the man who can stop a shell with his chest.
Last year felt like it was perched on a fence. On one side, you had the New York World's Fair right here in Queens, the world of tomorrow. All that white, modern architecture, the Trilon and Perisphere, bands playing, lights dancing on the water, gadgets that promised an easier life. On the other side, by September, you had war breaking out for real. Tanks rolling into Poland, blackout curtains in London.
Superman sits right on that crossroads. He's called the man of tomorrow, but half the time, he's dealing with today's very ordinary sins. Bad bosses, war profiteers, rackets, crooked politicians. It's as if Siegel and Schuster went out to the World's Fair in the afternoon and then read the late edition at night. And their hero grew out of both, part neon promise, part clenched jaw at the headlines.
And as for us, well, we managed 2 broadcasts last year. We're no Superman, but we're going to try to beat our own record, aiming for 5 episodes in 1940 if the tubes and the typesetters hold out.
5 shows, a world on edge, and a hero in red and blue trying to hold a few things together. That's our little corner of the airwaves. Tonight, we'll trace how his adventures grow from neighborhood scuffles to national emergencies, how a strong man starts facing strong minds, and how, somewhere in there, he even gets his own magazine. So stay with us here on Distinguished Comics Radio. We've got a lot of pages to turn. Let's lay tonight's route out plain. If you're reading along at home, we're talking the Superman stories in Action Comics numbers 8 through 19. On top of that, the big new solo book, Superman #1 and Superman #2, and his special turn in New York World's Fair comics from last year.
That's right, not just a feature anymore. There's a whole magazine on the stands now with nothing but Superman in it. 64 pages of the one and only, cover shouting, the complete story of the daring exploits of Superman. For a character who showed up less than 2 years ago in the middle of an anthology, that's a rocket ride.
In this young business, most of these books are crowded 10 deep. Detectives, magicians, funny fellows elbowing for space. For one costumed strongman to get his own title, that's a signal. The readers didn't just like him, they grabbed on with both hands. We'll come back to those solo issues in a bit. First, we pick up where we left off in Action Comics. Number 8 drops us into a story that could be happening on any city block. Boys Gone Wild.
Yeah, Clark sees a gang of kids wrecking things, knocking over pushcarts, roughing folks up for kicks. Papers call them delinquents, like they're a different species. Superman digs around and finds out they're being egged on by a crooked promoter who's turning juvenile mischief into a little business, steering them into real crime, then taking his cut.
Superman doesn't just smack heads and go home. He scares the boss straight and then takes time with the boys themselves, hauling them out of danger, lecturing them, even giving one lad a chance to prove himself by helping stop a robbery. It's a quick tale, but the question's bigger. Are these kids born bad, or are the grown-ups failing them? For an 8-page yarn, that's a lot of weight.
Then Action Comics 9 switches the backdrop from alleys to open water. On the splash, we've got Superman planting his feet on the deck of a ship, muscles straining, hauling a submarine up from the depths like he's pulling a stubborn fish.
In the story, a freighter disappears. Sailors whisper about a ghost sub. Clark noses around, and it turns out there's nothing supernatural. Just a stolen undersea craft being used to attack shipping and pull an insurance swindle. The owners of the line are in on it, ready to cash policies while their own crews go down.
So Superman dives under the waves. We see him cutting through the dark like a torpedo, bullets from the sub's deck guns sparking harmlessly off his skin when he surfaces. He rips open steel plates, bends periscopes, treats this marvel of modern warfare like it's a tin toy. And the men behind it? He hoists them on deck and delivers them to the authorities with a few choice words about valuing profit over human lives.
It hits a nerve with what we're reading now. Reports of real subs stalking the North Sea, tankers going down off the Orkneys, British destroyers hitting mines in the Thames estuary. Folks are suddenly aware that the ocean can be a battlefield. In Action 9, Siegel and Schuster plant their hero right into that anxiety and make him the one force that can literally drag the danger into the light.
Then comes Action Comics 10, and this one, Simon, may be the toughest yet. We start with a headline about a prison camp. Officially, it's some sort of desert road building project supposed to rehabilitate convicts with honest labor. In practice, it's a chain gang out in the sun, guards with whips, men collapsing in the dust.
Clark hears rumors of brutality, goes out to investigate as Superman, and what he finds is closer to a private kingdom. The warden and the contractor are in cahoots. They've turned state prisoners into cheap, disposable muscle for their pet project. Men are beaten for slowing down, worked half to death, and when accidents happen, the bosses chalk it up to discipline.
Superman's response isn't gentle. There's a panel that sticks with me. He walks right into the middle of the yard, chains snapping under his hands like thread. Guards fire. The bullets bounce off. And he just keeps coming. He grabs the overseer, lifts him one-handed, and marches him through every cruel little corner of that camp. The cramped bunks, the whipping post, the shack where a sick man's been left to rot.
He stages a reversal, puts the warden in the stripes, hands the lash to the prisoners. Not to actually use, but so they can see fear on the other side of the bars for once. It's rough justice, but the book is clear. This isn't rehabilitation, it's exploitation. By the end, the state steps in, the camp is cleaned out, and the contractor who skimmed off the profits is headed for indictment.
Back in the real world, we've had our own fights over work camps, company towns, sweatshops. Folks remember strikes that turned bloody, miners penned in by guards. The 30s have been one long argument about what a fair day's work and a fair jail sentence look like. In this story, Superman comes down hard on the side of the man with the blistered hands, even if that man's made mistakes.
3 issues, 3 settings, backstreets, high seas, desert barracks, and the same heartbeat underneath. If you've got power, you don't get to treat people like they're expendable. That's the Superman we're walking with as we head deeper into 1939. Action Comics 11 keeps that working man rhythm going. We open on the docks, warehouses, smokestacks, a night fog you can almost smell. Ships have been mysteriously catching fire, men hurt, cargo lost. The owners blame bad luck, maybe a careless match. Clark pokes around and finds deliberate sabotage arranged by a rival, and management that's been too cheap with safety to care.
Superman makes short work of the arsonists, tossing them around the pier like rag dolls, then corners the head man in his office. There's this great bit where he shakes the building's support girder just enough to make the whole place shudder. Suddenly, the fellow understands what it feels like to have your workplace collapse under you. By the last page, the docks are getting new alarms and sprinklers, not because an inspector said so, but because Superman turned fear in the right direction.
Issue 12 moves inland along the rails. We've got an aging bridge and a shiny new contract. A crooked engineer fudges his figures to save money. A contractor pockets the difference. And a trainload of passengers is set to roll over something that can't hold their weight. When the structure buckles, Superman's there, leaping to catch falling cars, bracing girders with his own shoulders until people can scramble clear.
Again, he doesn't stop at rescue. He hunts down the man who signed off on the faulty plans, forces a confession, and leaves him where prosecutors and newspaper readers can see it. The story doesn't waste panels on legal details. It just hammers home that cheating on steel and stone is the same as pointing a gun at a crowd.
Then comes Action Comics 13, one of my favorites in this run. Clark is assigned to cover a rash of accidents in the taxi business. Independent cabbies are getting run off the streets, tires slashed, windshields smashed, drivers beaten. A big syndicate wants every fare in the city, and they've got muscle and a few cooperative officials to help.
The pictures are terrific. We see Superman perched on a rooftop at night, watching as a gang flips a rival's cab. Next panel, he's down in the street, grabbing two toughs by the coat collars and knocking their heads together with a sound effect you can almost hear over the radio. He tails the racket up the chain. Garage bosses, a crooked dispatcher. Finally, the big man who's been buying off inspectors.
And he keeps stepping in for the little guy. There's a lovely sequence where he secretly takes the wheel of one cab, running a gauntlet of thugs who think they're about to pull another accident, only to find their car hoisted 6 feet in the air by a grinning Superman. By the end, the papers blare, "Cab racketeers receive sentence." Those words could sit on any real front page in New York or Chicago. We've seen headlines like that all decade.
Yeah, this is pure street corner stuff. Small operators against a combine. City Hall a little too cozy with the big outfit, and someone finally drawing a hard line. You don't need a cape to recognize that pattern, but it doesn't hurt to have one in your corner.
Action Comics 14 widens the circle again, this time back on the rails. There's a sleek new train service, big investment, lots of civic pride. Suddenly, a string of wrecks and delays. The public thinks the line is unsafe, investors panic, and in the shadows, there's a group waiting to scoop up the whole works for pennies.
Superman catches on when he notices the accidents all just happen to benefit the same speculators. He races alongside a hurtling train, catching a derailed car before it can tumble into a ravine. Inside, terrified commuters clutch the seats. Outside, he's literally holding their lives in his hands while he glares at a saboteur clinging to the rails.
The mastermind is no ordinary crook. This is where we meet, or meet again, depending which issue you started with, the Ultra-Humanite. Bald, frail, seated in a chair with a blanket over his legs, eyes sharp as drills. He calls himself the world's greatest scientific brain. He doesn't rob banks with a pistol. He moves stock prices with train wrecks and uses chemistry and engineering as his weapons.
And he remembers Superman. This isn't a one-and-done villain who falls off a bridge and vanishes. Ultra plots, fails, retreats, and vows to strike again. By the time you hit 14, you can tell there's a history between them, even if we haven't seen every chapter yet. That's unusual in these books. Most bad men go down with a, "so much for him," and that's that.
Having a recurring foe changes the flavor. It means the world keeps score. When Superman faces Ultra, he's not just busting another scheme. He's playing the next move in a longer game. Raw strength and moral stubbornness on one side, cold intellect and ambition on the other.
And it makes Superman feel more human, funny enough. The strongest man in the world, running up against a mind that can outthink him if he's not careful. He can bend rails, but he can't just punch every problem when Ultra is hiding behind dials and contracts and respectable frontmen.
From docks to cabs to commuter trains, these mid-30s stories keep circling the same idea. The systems we ride and work in, shipping, transit, city streets, are only as honest as the men running them. Superman is the hand that reaches in when that honesty fails. And now, for the first time, he has a nemesis clever enough to keep coming back.
Action Comics 15 throws us back to sea. The cover shows Superman straining against a massive submarine hull. And inside we find a tale of a stolen undersea craft and international maneuvering. A foreign power is quietly testing American defenses, and a few businessmen are happy to help if there's money in it.
Superman stands between the fleet and disaster, diving beneath the waves, ripping open conning towers, hauling ships out of each other's path. It's not a war story exactly, but you can feel that national defense flavor creeping in. In a world where U-boats are suddenly in the news, the idea of one strong figure physically pushing the threat back under the water has a certain wishful logic.
Issue 16 plants its feet on land and in politics. Right on the splash, you see a headline, Commission Resigns. And it's no coincidence. There's been graft in a public works project, a whitewashing investigation, and now an attempt to sweep the whole thing away with a tidy resignation and a few pats on the back.
Superman isn't interested in polite exits. He barges into plush offices, ignores locked doors, grabs frightened commissioners by their lapels, and demands real answers. By the last page, those men are facing not just lost titles, but criminal charges. Again, the pattern is familiar to anyone listening to actual newsreels. Boards resign in disgrace, but very few see the inside of a cell. In Superman's world, that balance is nudged a little closer to even.
Then Action Comics 18 really sharpens the white-collar angle. The story turns on an insurance racket. A company keeps paying out on an uncanny number of factory accidents. Families get a small check. Behind the scenes, crooked executives and their hired saboteur are making far more by betting on the policies and wrecking plants to order.
Clark notices the pattern in the Daily Star's morgue. Clippings of fires, collapses, explosions that all trace back to the same firm. As Superman, he starts turning up at the scenes before the accidents can fully happen, saving workers who were meant to be statistics. There's a chilling sequence where he confronts the saboteur in a darkened office, grabbing the man's hand just as he's about to throw a switch that would send acid spilling over a shop floor.
When he finally corners the executive, it's not in a back alley, it's in a well-appointed suite. Superman slams his fist into the wall, plaster raining down, and says in so many words, "Your pen was deadlier than any thug's gun." By then, the reader has seen both sides, the everyday workers at the mercy of bad luck, and the cool figure moving pins on a chart, treating human life as numbers.
Action Comics 19 takes that unease and raises it to a fever with the Purple Plague. The story opens quietly enough. Clark and Lois covering a laboratory demonstration. A careless moment, a cracked vial, and suddenly there's a mysterious disease loose in the city. Within a few pages, the Daily Star is running extras. Purple Plague grips Metropolis. People collapse in the streets, hospitals overflow, and fear spreads faster than the sickness.
Superman finds himself fighting on two fronts. On one side, he's racing to catch the man really responsible, a figure who knows too much about the germ, an all too familiar bald head lurking behind telephones and hired men. On the other, he's hauling doctors through cordons, fetching rare chemicals from distant labs in minutes, holding back crowds that might trample each other in panic.
There's a haunting panel where he bursts into a quarantined ward, arms full of antidote, while the patients lie still and gray. You can almost hear the clock ticking over each bed. He's a creature of physical power, forced to deal with something microscopic, invisible. It's only by tracking the chain of negligence and malice, finding who let this loose and why, that he can stop the next wave.
And looming behind a lot of this late 39 trouble is that same Ultra-Humanite. We see him or feel him in several of these tales, advising saboteurs, selling secrets, turning science into a weapon. He's not always on the front line, but he's often the man behind the curtain. For a comic, that's a sophisticated kind of villainy. No mask, no gimmick ray gun, just a mind that sees the world as pieces on a board.
By the time you close Action Comics 19, Superman's world has stretched a long way from the crooked lobbyist in issue 1. Now, he's grappling with epidemics, high finance, national defense, massive engineering projects. The stakes have gone from one woman on death row to whole cities under threat. And through it all, he's still the same figure, leaping into danger with that red cape trailing, insisting that lives come before ledgers. Now, let's talk about that milestone on the newsstand, Superman #1. If you pick it up expecting nothing but brand new adventures, you might be puzzled. A lot of what's inside are stories we've already walked through on this program.
Yeah, flip those pages and you'll see the Rocket leaving a doomed Krypton, the Kents finding the baby, Clark growing up strong. You'll see the San Monte War we covered from Action Comics 2, the Blakely mine disaster from number 3, the football tale from number 4. For faithful KDCR listeners, it's almost like a greatest hits album.
That's not a complaint. It's handy. Instead of tracking down half a dozen old issues, a new reader can get the whole early saga between 2 covers. But rather than rehearse every panel again, let's focus on what's new. Right up front, the origin gets room to breathe. We see more of Krypton than before. Tall spires, advanced machines, a scientist warning of doom while officials scoff.
We also spend more time with the Kents, not just the line that they found a baby, but little scenes, teaching him to keep his strength hidden, worrying over him, telling him he'll have to decide what kind of man he wants to be. You see Clark as an awkward youth, trying to rein himself in when a bully swings at him, or when he could leap a barn in one bound.
There are new panels of him pounding the pavement in the city, trying to get a job. Editors slam doors, call him inexperienced, tell him the paper's full. You feel for a page or two that he's just another fellow from out of town trying to make it. Then he pulls off that first big scoop, and suddenly the Daily Star needs him as much as he needs them.
The whole package sells an idea. This isn't just some circus strongman, he's the man of tomorrow. The cover says it. The inside ads repeat it. One man, one name, 32 pages, then more. It feels like a line being drawn. Superman stepping out from the crowd of features and saying, "All right, I'm headlining now."
Superman #2 is where the really new ground gets broken. The first long story is about boxing. Larry Trent, a washed-up contender who once held the championship in his fists, but lost it and never got back. When we meet him, he's bitter, drinking, convinced he's done.
Crooked promoters are using Larry as a name to sell tickets. They want him to take dives so the betting syndicate can clean up. There's a moment where they tell him straight, "Go down in the ring or we'll make sure you never fight again." You can see the shame on his face. Superman steps in, not by lecturing from the ropes, but by giving Larry a real second chance.
There's a sequence where Superman secretly helps Larry train, racing him along country roads, having him punch until his hands ache, forcing him to rebuild his courage as much as his muscles. On fight night, when the crooks try to sabotage him, drugging water, slipping in threats, Superman quietly interferes, keeping the playing field honest without stealing Larry's own victory.
By the final bell, Larry wins on his own merits. Superman's role is almost pastoral. The angel in the corner, making sure the scales aren't tipped. It's a story about dignity, about a man climbing out of the pit with a little unseen help and a lot of sweat. Feels right at home in a decade where plenty of folks are trying to get back up after a bad break.
Then we get Superman Champions Universal Peace. That title lands with extra force now that Europe is really at war. In the story, Superman uncovers an arms ring, manufacturers and agents who are quietly steering 2 nations toward conflict so they can sell more guns and shells. We've seen him tackle that kind of thing in San Monte, but here the canvas is wider.
He smashes weapon stockpiles, intercepts bombers in midair. There's a wild panel where he literally hurls himself at a warplane barreling toward a city, tears through the fuselage, and drags the pilot out before it crashes. He spirits corrupt diplomats into private conferences, where they're forced to admit who's been paying them. And for once, you see not just generals, but ordinary soldiers confronted with the fact that they were being played.
It's bold stuff. While real-world leaders are giving speeches about no chance of a speedy end to war except through united action, here's a comic book man in tights saying, "If you're profiting from bloodshed, I'll come for you." It doesn't pretend he can stop all wars, but it makes a clear moral stand. Peace isn't just pretty talk. It's something you fight for against people who'd rather see the guns keep roaring.
The other fresh stories in Superman #2 follow that pattern. An attempt to bring down an airline with sabotage and bad maintenance. A skyscraper mystery where workers are dying in accidents that turn out to be anything but. Superman tears through riveted beams, hauls planes back into the sky by their tails, faces crooks who hide behind ledgers.
Taken together, you can think of Superman #1 as the collected gospel, the early stories we've already traced here on KDCR, while Superman #2 feels like the first true expansion of the world. New threats, bigger stakes, same man in the cape insisting that tomorrow doesn't have to belong to the worst of us. Before we sign off, I want to take you out to Flushing Meadows. Not the quiet park it is on a winter weekday, but the way I saw it last year when I went to the New York World's Fair. You stepped off the train and there they were, the Trilon and Perisphere, that tall white spike and giant globe gleaming against the sky. Fountains playing, bands marching, flags of 60-odd nations hanging in the breeze. The motto everywhere, the world of tomorrow.
Meanwhile, in the world of today, Europe was sliding into war. Kind of wild, standing under those modern towers, hearing about invasions on the radio at night. No wonder somebody thought, let's drop Superman in the middle of this place and see what happens.
In the Superman at the World's Fair story, Clark, Lois, and their editor all head out there on assignment. First, we get some fun, Clark trailing behind carrying bags while Lois rushes to see the pavilions. Then trouble, because trouble always finds Lois Lane. There's an industrial exhibit, test runs of new machines, and behind the scenes, a scheme to wreck the fair's power system and embarrass a rival firm.
Superman spends half the tale racing trains and monorails to get there. There's a marvelous panel of him overtaking a sleek silver streamliner, cape-snapping, passengers gawking out the windows. Once on the grounds, he's leaping over the perisphere, dashing along the broad avenues, darting through crowds of fairgoers who just think they saw a colorful blur.
He stops sabotage in the Trilon's shadow, tears into a hidden chamber where crooks are overloading circuits, and when explosions threaten, he shields fragile exhibits and people alike. We see him framed against the fountains at the Lagoon of Nations, water and light behind him, the promise of peaceful invention all around. For a few pages, that world of tomorrow feels almost within reach.
There's a bittersweetness to it now. We know, sitting here in January 1940, with the wind knifing down the avenues and war news between songs on the dial, that some of those pavilions have already gone dark because their homelands are fighting for their lives. The fair was built as a house of many mansions. The cannons overseas don't much care about that.
And yet the story comforts. It says, even in the middle of a crowded, hopeful fairground, some men will try to turn progress into profit or power, and someone has to yank the plug on them. Superman does that job, then melts back into the crowd so ordinary folks can keep dreaming. In these tales, the contest we talked about earlier, raw power guided by conscience versus cold intellect guided by ambition, keeps playing out, whether in a back alley, a boardroom, or beneath the Trilon's white flank. Before we go racing off into next week, I'm going to put us both on the spot, Robert, and all you listeners can play along at home. Out of this whole tall stack we've lugged through the studio tonight, Action Comics 8 through 19, Superman 1 and 2, the World's Fair special, if you could only keep one story, which would it be?
You don't start with the easy pitches, do you, Simon? All right, I'll warm up in the bullpen while you step to the plate. You go first.
Fair enough. For me, it's the Purple Plague yarn in Action Comics 19. There's something about that one that lingers. We're used to seeing Superman bend steel, stop trains, haul submarines out of the drink. In this story, he's up against something he can't grab. A germ loose in the air, people dropping in the streets, hospitals jammed, the Daily Star running extras that make your throat feel a little tight even if you're perfectly well. It feels close to the bone for January of 1940. You read the foreign pages and it's all feverish armies on the march, cities blacked out, new weapons whispered about. Ordinary folks here may be safe in their apartments, but there's that same question in the back of the mind. If something awful starts rolling, will anyone be able to stop it in time? What I love in that tale is the way they answer it. Superman doesn't shrug and say, "That's for scientists." He's in the thick of it, carrying doctors through police lines, fetching rare chemicals from labs half a continent away, bursting into gray wards with armloads of antidote. And then he does the thing that matters most. He traces the plague back to the man who treated it like a plaything, who let carelessness and profit turn into a city's nightmare. So it isn't just a battle with disease, it's a battle with negligence. In a winter when a radio bulletin can make you sit up straighter in your chair, there's comfort in that image. A sick, scared city, and one stubborn fellow in a cape insisting that no matter how strange the danger gets, somebody still has to be responsible for how we treat each other. That's my pick.
Hard to argue with that, Simon. I'll come at it from a different angle, though. My vote goes to the Larry Trent story in Superman #2, the boxing one. Maybe that's the Chicago in me, or just having sat through a few smoky fight nights. But I like seeing Superman in somebody's corner instead of at center ring. Larry's a man who's had his shot, lost it, and let the world tell him he's finished. The crooks see him as nothing but a name on the poster and a body to throw on the canvas when the betting slips say so. What Superman does there isn't glamorous. He doesn't knock out the champ and take the belt himself. He runs road work with Larry, takes the punches in sparring, quietly swats away the dirty tricks so that, for once, the better man can win on a fair field. In a decade where a lot of folks have been knocked down through no fault of their own, there's something mighty heartening about a story that says, with a little honest help and a lot of sweat, you can still get back up and hear the crowd cheer your name. So if you're keeping score at home, Simon votes for the plague and responsibility. I vote for the ring and a second chance. And you, out there by the dial, you're allowed to have your own card. Speaking of contests, we've got a little programming bout of our own coming up. For those of you who like to tinker with the dials, our next show will be going out on what we're calling a short band high frequency special. If you want to catch it, you'll have to go to Patreon to get your correct tuning bandwidth. Ask your nearest radio enthusiast. He'll know what that means.
On that short band excursion, we're taking a step back before Superman. We'll be covering New Fun #6, More Fun Comics 7 through 32, and the Comics Magazine #1, with a special reading focus on More Fun 18 to 23. Buried in those early pages, we've turned up something remarkable. The Dr. Occult stories by those same two fellows, Jerry and Joe, a kind of precursor to Superman, a cloaked investigator who walks very similar rooftops in a different costume.
You can see them working out ideas, secret identities, mysterious powers, even the notion of a champion standing between the everyday world and weirder dangers. If you're curious where the Man of Tomorrow's roots lie, that's a trip worth taking.
But if you're sticking with our regular KDCR broadcast, don't feel shortchanged. We have an even more tantalizing plate lined up. Detective Comics numbers 27 through 34, starring a certain Batman. Dark rooftops, capes of a different cut, and a brand new sort of nighttime Avenger.
If the stack feels heavy, we'll give you a little mercy. You can skip 28 and 34 if you must, but don't you dare miss 27 and 29 through 33. Those are just superb. Sleek, shadowy, and sharp in ways that make a nice counterpoint to Superman's more daylight crusading. And hey, 6 issues is at least less than this week.
As we fold up tonight's mountain of pages, thank you for climbing it with us. From Delinquent Boys in Action Comics 8 to the Purple Plague in 19, From Larry Trent's comeback in Superman 2 to that stroll under the perisphere, these stories have tried to answer the question a lot of us are asking in this uneasy winter. What ought strength be for?
We'd love to hear which tale hit you hardest. Was it the prison camp, the cab racket, the fairground, the plague? Drop a letter to distinguishedcomicsradio@gmail.com, care of KDCR, New York, and tell us. We'll be here, reading your words between panels.
For tonight, this is Simon Carver, wishing that in 1940 your worst troubles stay inked on cheap paper, and your heroes, caped or otherwise, keep leaping off it when you need them.
And this is Robert Reed saying, keep your chin up, keep your dimes ready for the next issue, and keep tuning that dial right here.
You've been listening to Distinguished Comics Radio on KDCR, New York. Good night, friends.